Yo, TCG here, and March of the Machines is just around the corner. The full set's out, and so I'm doing my Explorer and Pioneer set review, going through the top 10 cards that I'm the most excited to play. It's a bit subjective, but hey, if there's anything I miss, let me know in the comments. If you have anything you're like, hey, what do you think about this card, drop it down there as well. Wait a second, before you get into the video, please do subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. Thank you, it means the world. I have some honourable mentions, so let's get into those. Change the equation, just wanted to talk about this a little bit. So, 1 in a blue, choose one counter target spell with mana value 2 or less, or counter target red or green spell with mana value 6 or less. Thing here, much more of a sideboard card, and an indication that we're never going to get flash freeze. Rest in peace. The counter target spell with mana value 2 or less, you're never going to be wanting to play at main deck, I think, for this purpose. Two considerations here. Firstly, what turn am I going to be casting it on? What turn will my opponent be on when they're casting the spell this will be countering? And when you're on the draw, they've got a 3-drop, right? But then also, if you think about Pioneer Explorer, the format's kind of revolving around 3-mana cards. Outside of Mono Green, you've got things like Fable, the Mirror Breaker, you've got Greasefang, all these like 3-mana cards which are super integral to the format. And so, versus Mono Green in particular, like being able to counter both their Kiora or Troll, as well as the Storm of the Festival, is kind of nice. So hey, I think just a sideboard card, but you do have to consider, like, is it going to be this, or the Stainable Sure? Just an honourable mention on the list here. Drafted Butcher, I wanted to give a shout out to the kind of Phyrexian cards. There's a limited number of them. The problem with them is like they're all like Phyrexian matters, like sacrifice Phyrexian creatures, other Phyrexians you control. Butcher is really nice though. The ability to ETB give creatures you control Menace is actually super powerful, especially because you can bring it out of the graveyard, and it does that ability as well as buffing your team as well. Just in case there's enough Phyrexian tools. And the mana doesn't look like it. But one to keep an eye on potentially. Wrenn and Realmbreaker here is on my honorable mention list. This is one of the most hyped cards coming into the set. However, don't be mad at me. When you look at this card, where do you want to play it? In Mono Green? The core's really good. Right? You don't want to disrupt that shell. It's not really doing anything that none of the cards you're doing do. It protects itself, but only if you play it on turn 4, and you can play it for 3 and then untap. And you've got a target land, which doesn't untap, just to denote it, and you get to attack with it, and it's got hexproof and can block and stuff, and that's cool. Mill 3 cards, put a permanent card from among them into your hand. Okay, fine. Alright, decent. But I just don't think there's a good home in the format right now for Wrenn and the Realmbreaker. Maybe that changes, but for the time being, it's not on my list of cards I'm super hyped to play with. Ozolith the Shattered Spire. I didn't want to take up a slot on my top 10 for this, I cut it out. But I did want to give a shout out to all the counter cards that are coming up in the set. And some nice buffs, I think, to the Hardened Scales deck, both in Pioneer and Explorer. Here, Legendary Artifact. If one or more +1/+1 counters will be put onto a artifact or creature you control, that many +1 counters are put on it instead. And then 1 in a green tap, put a counter on it. Artifact creature control, activate and there's a sorcery. The ability on there, the activated one, is a bit slow of course, but just having another Hardened Scales effect in the deck is pretty nice. I wouldn't play a bunch of them, obviously it's legendary as well, but seems decent. Another one maybe a bit controversial, but sort of once in the future. 3 to play, 2 to equip, obviously the classic sword template, +2/+2, protection from black and blue. Whenever a quick creature does comment to players to level 2, then you may cast an instant sorcery spell with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost, and then it gets exiled. The sword is powerful, that's not really what I'm doubting here. And Pro Black is also a really important colour for protection from removal. At the moment, the only place the swords are really seeing play, something like Hammer, you have cards to go fetch an equipment, and so having one in the toolbox that you play out of the sideboard is reasonable. And I think this is fine there too, but I don't think it's going to make like a huge impact or anything, so it's in my honourable mentions list again. Alright, Polukranos Reborn. Green for 4/5. Oh. He brought back Leatherback Baloth, but it's got reach, legendary creature Hydra, and then it's the first of our transform cards we're looking at here, 6, and Phyrexian White, transformer only as a sorcery. Now, a lot of these transform cards are very exciting, but these transform as a sorcery effects, where you're paying a bunch of mana into them, their sorcery speed, and obviously your opponent can just respond with removal. That's kind of the key downside. I like Polukranos a lot because it's cheap. It fits into something like Mono Green Aggro very easily and is already like a 3-mana 4/5, which you're like fairly happy with. It's also like super sim. You pay 6 mana and it turns into a Wormcoil Hydra, which is the sweetest design I've seen in a little while. Obviously a bit of a throwback, but it is really cool. But I do think it's also pretty good, and you're using that ability as just like an upside. You're not trying to build around it, really like lean into it for you to kind of take advantage of. 3-mana 4/5 is solid. Continuing that theme of transform cards, let's talk about some of the other ones, which are super sweet. These cards got Jin-Gitaxias, Sheoldred, Urabrask. Really cool. However, all of them have this pretty big downside of being able to be killed in response. And because you can activate it as a sorcery, even Urabrask here, even though it costs a single red to transform it, as a sorcery, it means that when your opponent casts the removal spell, you can't do a response. And so, hey, let's talk about them individually, though. So, Jingataxius, 3 blue for a 5/5, has Ward 2, so just protects itself a little bit. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, draw a card. Okay, sweet, and then you can transform it as long as you've got 7 or more cards in hand for 3 and a blue. Again, happens as a sorcery. It's unfortunate, it's just how it goes. But when you do, of course, you get a Saga. And the sagas you get off these transforming predators are super, super powerful. So, draw cards equals the number of cards in your hand, no maximum hand size. Amazing. Return on and remember you have to have 7 cards in your hand to activate it anyway, so you're going to be drawing up to 14, and then obviously no maximum hand size. Return on non-Phyrexian creatures, so they're in his hands, and then you may cast any number of spells from your hand without paying their mana costs. Exile the Great Synthesis, and then return to the battlefield. So this Jingataxis was the one that I was going to leave in, because this third ability here to cast any number of spells from your hand without paying their mana costs, may as well just say win the game. Really. In the right deck anyway. And so, hey, this is the one I was the most excited to play with, and I still am pretty excited to play with it, but it's been downgraded onto my honourable mentions list. Sheldred, also really sweet, 3 black for a 4/5, menace, enter the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a non-creature creature or planeswalker, and it's worth saying that, like, the cards are fine on their front sides. In Standard, they are great, but in Explorer Pioneer, they're a little under, they're not as powerful. 5 mana for a big creature that makes your opponent sacrifice a creature isn't that strong. Right, but yeah, 4 and a black transform if an opponent has any more cards in the graveyard, which can be a little tricky, but hey, that's fine. And then again, you get a super powerful enchantment saga as the saga into the battlefield. For each opponent, destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker they control. Then they discard 3 cards and mill 3 cards, and then you get to put, you basically Rise to the Dark Realms, put all creature cards from graveyards onto the battlefield under your control, and then it transforms again. That's how it goes. Very, very cool. Super awesome. Urabrask, this front face ability, it's a 4 mana 4/4 with first strike, so not that impressive. But whenever you cast this as a sorcery spell, you get to deal damage to your opponent and add red, which, you know, you can try and storm off a bit, but there's not really the tools in the format. When you transform it, obviously you need to have that cast 3 or more instant sorcery spells this turn, and pay red. As a sorcery again, sadly, no activating response. ETB, deals 3 damage to target a Cronin and each creature they control. Then the next step, you get 3 treasure tokens, and the last step, you can cast instant sorcery spells from any graveyard. Any graveyard. If a spellcaster will be put into graveyard exile instead. Really cool. Undecided turn, just like a bit of a Past in Flames both graveyards, which is awesome again, but it's just a little bit too clunky. I'm definitely going to mess around with some of these cards, and you may well see them in some decks that I put together. So, a couple more the last honourable mention is Invasion New Phyrexia. I think there's a couple more. It's the first battle we see here. Battles are quite interesting. Battle is this new mechanic with the set. So here, Invasion New Phyrexia, you're paying X white blue, and then when it's the battlefield, you get to do the thing, and then these battles are, and all the battles in the set are sieges, which means when it enters, you give it to the opponent to protect, and then everyone except the player who protects it can attack it. It has a defense value of 6, which means it takes 6 damage to destroy it. And then when you effectively kill it, you get to do the thing. So, Invasion New Phyrexia, you create X 2/2 white and blue night creature tokens with vigilance. Okay, reasonable. And the reason why this is a honourable mention is that there's not like a clear-cut home for this. It's a really nice mana sink, but there isn't like a deck that necessarily wants this right now. Let's talk about the transform side. Because, you know, Teferi. And so yeah, when you do that 6 damage, you get a Teferi, a Kosa of Zalfir Planeswalker with 4 loyalty, +1, draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards, I see discard a creature card. -2, you get an emblem with knights, you can drag up +1 persona and have ward 1. And then -3. Tap X creature you control when you do shuffle target non-land permanent opponent controls with mana value X or less into its owner's library. So this is really, really cool, and this is the first Teferi we're really seeing that plays well with creatures. Okay, blue, white, X gets some knights, so if you're paying 3 mana, you're getting a knight. If you're paying 4 mana, you're getting 2 knights. It scales, but not like in a meaningfully good way. And then you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get the back half. So I'm a little disappointed, honestly. Even though the modes on Teferi are super, super sweet, draw 2 cards, then like discard 2 or 1 is awesome. They're giving your knights +1 power and ward is really, really cool, and maybe you could build into knights with this. Even then, you think you maybe want to play something like History of Benalia, which, you know, hey. But Teferi's really, really cool. I don't want to poo-poo it too much, but I don't know what I'm doing with it yet, and so that's part of the reason why it's not in my most exciting cards to play with. A lot of honourable mentions, a couple more here. Invasion of Tarkir. So this is a battle that messes around with dragons, and the cool thing here, it has a removal spell on the front side. So 1 of the reds, when it enters the battlefield, reveal any number of dragon cards from your hand. When you do, it deals X +2 damage to any other target, where X is the number of cards revealed this way. So you're doing 2 mana 2 if you reveal a dragon, 2 mana 3. We've seen these kind of spells before, but obviously it has a bit of an upside. One of the other things with this is that you're playing dragons, so at some point you're going to be able to attack for 5 with your dragon and do the damage, you would think. Which is pretty cool. But hey, I love the kind of like dragons mana decks we used to see, like Thunderbreak Regent type stuff. Maybe a deck tech coming soon with that, as we do have Thunderbreak on Arena. But yeah, and then the other side of it, you get a Defiant Thundermaw Dragon. It's a flying trample 4/4. Whenever a dragon you control attacks, it does 2 damage to any target. Very solid, and again, like fairly free. You get the removal, then it sits in play as a battle, and then once you attack it down or deal damage to it, you can deal damage to it with instant sorcery as long as they do damage to like any target, or there are some things that specifically target battles. And then, yeah, you get to, you know, flip it, and then, yeah, you get a dragon. Invasion of Ixalan is one I also cut from my top 10. Enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal a permanent from among them, and put it into your hand. Simply looks at the top 5 for a permanent. Really, really cool, and then sits around. Again, these effects that kind of do a thing that's useful, and then sit around and play the battle, and you get the upside is kind of where the mechanic excels, I think. And then a value of 4 for the defense. Trample, 4/3. Whenever you cast a spell, Belligerent Regisaur gets it destructible 10 a turn. Just solid. Just solid. So yeah, there you go. This is the point where I also get to be a bit upset, because we have a set with Convoke in, and we have not been given Quarter Calling. Maybe they just don't want it in Standard, which is, I guess, fair enough, but I'd really like to have it on Arena for Explorer. That'd be really cool. Please, Wizards. Please. Now into the actual top 10. Coming in at number 10, Monastery Mentor. Obviously, an old classic friend. 2 and a white for a 2/2 with Prowess. Human Monk. Whenever you cast an all-creature spell, create a 1/1 white monk creature token with Prowess. Card's very powerful. I've seen play in older formats like Legacy. It's not got like a stable home in Pioneer at the moment. However, it is a card that crops up in sideboards every now and again, and it's just like a army in a can house to itself. And so I'm really excited to get it on Arena and play it in some stuff. Next up, and a bit of a more spicy one really, Breach the Multiverse. 5 black sorcery. Each player mills 7 cards. For each player, choose a creature or planeswalker card in that player's graveyard, put them on the battlefield onto your control, then each creature you control becomes a Phyrexian Delicious types. It's expensive, but each player mills 10, get 2 things back, 1 for you, 1 for your opponent. Obviously, depending on what your opponent's playing, could be better or worse. There are a lot of attractors floating around at the minute, I'll say it. Hey, live the dream. But really, really powerful. It's just a case of getting to that 7 mana. It might be something that you might want to do in something like Mono Black Devotion, where if you have a couple of permanents in play, that Nykthos can activate really easily. The one thing with that is that we don't have Urbolg on Arena, which makes that a little bit more difficult to play Nykthos in Mono Black Devotion. There are some other places I could see you trying this out. Even in a black-green ramp deck where you have some things like Titan, you'd be really, really happy with this. And 10 cards is a lot more than 6 like you would against Storm the Festival. Obviously, you only get one thing, but you get something in your opponent, and a lot of the time it's going to be something good. Hey, steal a Sheoldred, steal the Traxxas, do what you want. Number 8 is Pylon. Fairly obvious, fairly safe to be honest. 3 in a black instant with Convoke. Destroy target creature or planeswalker, surveil 2. It's pretty straightforward, just very, very efficient. That Convoke ability, you tap some creatures, make it cheaper. You can cast it with no mana if you have a board set up already, which is, you know, you take your opponent by surprise, but destroy target creature or planeswalker, surveil 2 is just super efficient. The Convoke to make it cheaper. We already see some of the 4 mana effects like this get played, and so Pylon I think will be just great in the format. Bloodfeather Phoenix is close to my favourite card in the set. That's partly because I have a Phoenix EDH deck, a Phoenix Commander deck, which I won't go into detail of, it's pretty bad. But 2 mana for 2/2 with flying, can't block, Okay, interesting. Tell me more. Whenever an instant sorcery spell you control does damage to an opponent or battle, you may pay red, and if you do, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield and it gains haste. One of the things with Phoenix, which has fallen a bit but to the wayside in Pioneer, and in Explorer you're still missing all the delve spells, is that it needs a bit of oomph. Alright, it needs a little bit more going on. Here with Bloodfeather Phoenix, we can look to discard this early and then bring it back, and give us another thing to bring out of the graveyard alongside our normal Arclight Phoenixes. On top of that, I think it has some extra applications. Because it's only 2 mana instead of 4, obviously it's much more just like straight up castable. And so you can start pressuring your opponent early with it and then bring it back. And so I think Bloodfeather Phoenix is really good. We'll see how it plays out, but I'm super excited to get my hands on this to play with online. Into the Fire. A modal card, a powerful modal card in my opinion. 2 and a red, 2 damage to each creature, planeswalker, and battle. And then the other mode on it, put any number of cards from your hand onto the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards plus 1. It's got a Pyroclasm, which, you know, also hits planeswalkers, which can be pretty nice. Assuming you're not playing planeswalkers yourself, I mean, hey. But this, put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards plus 1 ability. Something like the blue-red enigmatic incarnation deck would love to have this. You get to clean up creature decks, like mono-white, mono-red, even have, again, sweep away like multiple elves or mana creatures from decks like green or elves. But then you have this ability to kind of go digging for your combo, as well as being able to tuck back extra attractors that you draw that you want to go grab later on with your Enigmatic Incarnation or Transmogrify type effects. It's pretty great. I think Into the Fire is really, really good, so here it is. Deeproot Wayfinder. This is the one that I maybe would think about moving up the list. It's a really, really sweet card. I'm just not entirely sure how good it'll be. 1 and a green for 2/3. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player or battle surveil 1, then you can return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. I've messed around a lot recently with Elvish Reclaimer decks. You can see some of those videos on the YouTube channel. But in like a black-green mid-range shell, which has got some, you know, new tools recently, to be fair, as well. You have both removal and disruption to kind of pressure your opponent's creatures off the board, and you can play a bunch of utility lands and like lands manners effects. There are a bunch of cards that make you want to play with lands, whether it be stuff like Titania, mess around with like fetch lands and doing other things like that, recurring with like Ramanap. One of the things I've been trying to get to work in the format for a while is Dread Presence with Dryad of the Elysian Grove. And having ways to just kind of like power you up in terms of like numbers of lands while using fetches to kind of be able to keep recurring them, like Riveteer's Overlook, those kind of lands, and along with Fable Passage to kind of keep bringing back from your graveyard, so you're not just relying on hitting them with Surveil. There's enough there, I think, to build like a really solid shell for this, and yeah. Coming in at number 4, we have Errant and Gyada. 1 white blue for a 2/3 with flash, flying legendary creature Human Angel. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and then you can cast spells with flash or flying from the top of your library. Really interesting. I did a video recently on Blue White Flash. Deck's really, really sweet archetype. Having a way to gain some card advantage, casting things like Spell Queller or Selfless Spirit, which gets flash here off the top of your library, is really, really nice, as well as being like a flash flying threat by itself. Lets you know a bit more when you're using like card selection type things, like when you're cracking clues. It gives you a nice source of card advantage for the Blue White Flash deck, which is awesome. Coming in at number 3 on our top 10 cards of the set, Thalia and the Gitrog Monster. 1 white, black, green, Abzan colors, legendary creature Human Frog Horror, a real mishmash of creature types, but that's what these all are. 4/4 with first strike and death touch. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, and then creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Whenever Thalia the Gitrog Monster attacks, sacrifice a creature or land, then draw a card. I like playing with lands. I already talked a little bit about doing like things like Dread Presence, Titania, Tireless Tracker, Ramanap Excavator, Dryad type stuff. Lotus Crypt, there's the list goes on and on and on. And Thalia both fits into that kind of shell to power that with the additional land drop, and you sacrifice a creature or land and draw a card. That helps you get lands in your graveyard and draws you towards the pieces. Is awesome, while also disrupting everything your opponent's doing, and that's really the key. Is that the creatures and non-licensed lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. This here, despite being 4 mana, is still going to turn off a bunch of the things your opponent's doing, while giving you this huge engine, which is awesome. And that's why Thalia is number 3 on my list. Down to the final 2, we've got Rona, Herald of Invasion. 1 and a blue for a 1/3. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, untap Rona, Herald of Invasion. and then tap, draw a card, then discard a card. Who doesn't like a Merfolk Looter? And even better than that, who doesn't like a Merfolk Looter with some extra text? So whenever you cast a legendary spell, you get to untap it, you know, loot again, and then it's got this 5 mana and a Phyrexian Black ability to transform it, which you can, again, it activates as a sorcery, but the idea here is that you're going to use this to generate some card selection, looting over a series of turns, and then get it back. A bit more on that in a second. Rona Tolarian Obliterator is the flip side. 5/5 with Trample. Whenever a source deals damage to Rona, that source's controller accesses a card from the hand at random. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield under your control, otherwise you may cast without paying its mana cost. The most exciting version of Phyrexian Negator, Obliterator ability type thing that I've seen. Seems pretty nuts to me. Obviously, that's the upside. You have to have this in play and then pay the 5 mana to transform it. But there's a bit more going on here. And one of the reasons this got so high up on my list, actually, is because of Tyvar. And if you're familiar with the channel, you know that I've been playing with this a bunch recently. Tyvar and the ability to recur 2 mana creatures is why I was so excited with this. While also letting you use the loot ability as though Ed Haste. Pretty cool, pretty coal. You get to bring it back later in the game, and then you can transform it, maybe, after it's died the first time or whatever. And the other thing that made me really excited is that you get to play this, and then also Jace Prodigy in Pioneer at the moment, but hopefully we'll get Jace Prodigy and the rest of the Origins Planeswalkers on Arena sometime soon. It gives you another really awesome 2-drop kind of loot effect that also has this massive upside on it. Rona seems awesome, and with Tyvar it might be really sweet. The number 1 card on my list may surprise you. In fact, I don't know if anyone would have been able to call this, but it is a battle. And it is Invasion of Kaldheim. 3 in a red. When Invasion of Kaldheim enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your hand, then draw that many cards. Until the end of your next turn, you may play cards exiled this way. And then you get this battle. And then, obviously, if you do the 4 damage, it gets to flip. Some of you might remember the card Escape to the Wilds. Was 3 red, green, exile top 5 cards of your library. You may play cards exile this way to the end of your next turn, and then you may play an additional land this turn. This does something a little bit similar. You're instead exiling the remaining cards in your hand, then getting some new ones, and then you can use whatever you have left on the next turn. It's not the same, it's kind of the opposite, but you have a bunch of extra upside. Nice, you get to refill your hand, use some extra spells. Cool. What does the flip side do? Pyre of the World Tree is an enchantment. Discard a land card, Pyre of the World Tree deals 2 damage to any target. Seem familiar? And yeah, we get a Seismic Assault, but not just any Seismic Assault. There's even more. Whenever you discard a land card, exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn. I have a bunch of different designs running through my head, and this is the card that I am the most excited to try and play with and build around and break. I hope you enjoyed the video. I am super excited for the set. There are a bunch of cards, even the like honourable mention type things that I'm really excited to play with, even if they didn't make it into the actual top 10. If there's any cards you're like, you didn't mention this, or I think you're overrating this or whatever, let me know in the comments. If you've got anything you want to ask my opinion on, also there, or anything in particular you want to see over the first few weeks of the set being released. Because it does come out on Arena on, I believe, Tuesday. I think it's the 18th. Super excited, super excited. Please do like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Really appreciate it. And yeah, peace out.